Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Time to Calibrate podcast. This is episode 39. I'm Brent Robillard, editor of The Calibrated Wrist and Calibre321 on Instagram. As always, I'm joined by my colleagues Bob Allaby from Time to Go Travel and Timepieces, and Mark Levesque, freelance writer and North American brand director for Isotope Watches. Today's episode is one I've actually been looking forward to for quite a while because we're joined by someone who represents the modern design-driven side of independent watchmaking. Huiy Tang, co-founder of RZE Watches, or RZE Watches, depending on which country you are coming from, and head of global marketing for the brand. If you spent any time around the contemporary tool watch scene over the past few years, there's a good chance you've come across RZE. The brand has built a strong reputation for lightweight titanium cases, purpose-built designs, and an approach that blends practicality and a very recognizable aesthetic, all without taking itself too seriously. Huiy joins us today to talk about the evolution of RZE, what it takes to build a modern microbrand in an increasingly crowded space, and how design, materials, and community all play a role in shaping what the brand has become. We'll also dig into how RZE approaches watches differently and where things might be headed next. Huiy, welcome to the show. It's great to have you with us today.
Thanks. It's an honor to be on the podcast. And like myself, I've been looking forward to talking to you guys about the brand as well as just, I'm honored that you've been open to sharing the stage with me and jumping on the podcast with your community. It's really, really great to see you guys all on this pod.
Well, it's interesting because we often only get to see you around shows like Vancouver and Toronto and maybe Montreal coming up shortly. So it's awesome to join you here this morning. We always start with our wrist checks. And so I think that because you're the guest, we're going to let you go first as we always do. What's on your wrist this morning, Huiy?
Yeah, so this is a common piece to find on my wrist. It's the UTD 8000. And so over the last year, I definitely, it's a little bit biased being the brand owner, co-founder to always be wearing this, but it is something that I do believe is super comfortable to wear. It's just something that you can grab and go. And that's something that I think is also kind of trending in the watch community right now is you just want to wake up and not have to wind it and have it be right. And that's something aside from the toughness and stuff like that, the easiness, especially during the holiday season when everything's really hectic. I don't need to make it a life decision, just like boom, digital watch.
That's great. What about you, Bob?
So I'm actually packing up for a trip. We're heading south tomorrow morning, Mexico, Huatuco, first time being in that area of Mexico. And I was just adjusting a bracelet on the Venecianico Nereid. This is the blue mother of pearl dial. It's going to be my beach watch. So that's what's on wrist today.
Looking good. And
Thanks.
you, Mark?
Well, we had our podcast last episode. We talked about watch trading and my adventures in watches. And we said that 2025 wasn't over yet. There was time enough for me to make another trade. And lo and behold, I did. An opportunity to get a Fortis Novanaut in stainless steel came out on Can Watch Co. From a friend, a dealer in Toronto. And I offered him my Pelagos for it, and he accepted. And this difference in the weight between the titanium Pelagos and this stainless steel giant monster watch is unreal. This thing's like 230 grams, but it's really well balanced because the bracelet's really thick and big, and so it's nice and heavy, but it feels great. Honestly, it's a fantastic watch. I've always liked it. I used to have a B42, a regular one from years ago, and I thought the proportions were nice. The weight fit, the legibility, the hands are super long. The glow is amazing. They have Lumcast numerals on there. No, I'm very happy with it. I'm ecstatic with it. So that's what I've got on wrist. What about you, Bob? Brent?
Well, actually, I just want to comment on what you've got on wrist there, because every time you get a new watch, you have these glowing reviews of it. And I'm always interested to hear it. I was waiting for this morning just to hear about that one because we had ribbed you about it the last time we did the podcast. And so what you don't know is that Huiy and Bob and I have already started taking odds on how long that actually lasts. And you're
Yeah. Well, you know what it is? It's something will bug me at some point, and then I won't be able to get past it. And, because I've always traded and I've got this ability to do it, and I know how easy it is for me to get that going. There's no wall. Some people don't like selling watches because it's a pain in the ass. Some people don't like doing trades because it's a pain in the ass. I don't have that problem. Like I can get that done pretty easily. So as soon as something bothers me, it'll be. And a side note, The Pelagos was very accurate. Obviously, cost certified and all that stuff. Was about a second and a half a day. I've had this for a week and a half. It has gained 1 second the entire week and a half.
That's accurate. Yeah.
It's super accurate. The bezel action is phenomenal. It's on bearings and it's bi-directional, which is really neat. And it's a 60-click bezel, so it's really solid feeling. No play at all. My first time this movement, the LGP L100, which is Fortis Work 17, that they claim they helped develop, which is marketing talk for. We bought a movement from Bajupre. But yeah, I think it's really cool. The class is pretty awesome.
We've never done this before, but we should have a bezel off right now. You and I, Mark. hold the bezel up to the mic.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Go for it. You start. You first.
I'll go first.
Yeah,
it's pretty nice. Go ahead. I think mine sounds better.
Yeah, but I can assure you mine feels better.
Mark's going to have that traded by next week.
It's not a really fair comparison. I mean,
well, this is
what's
totally
the
not
retail
fair.
on the Venezianico?
Probably about $1,000, I think.
Yeah, this one's in Canadians over 8,000.
Is it over? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Which is why it was such a good trade for you, actually, with that Tudor rack.
You know what it is? The value for brands like Fortis and value retention is not there. Whereas Tudor, and Tudor just raised their price. I don't know if you noticed, but yesterday, on January 1st, all Tudor prices went up over $500 per piece.
I didn't know that.
And that's when the tariffs came down by 15% too. So
yeah,
it's just the standard Tudor Rolex strategy, right? Every year it's got to take the bump. They can't leave it.
Yeah, but when you're looking at Rolex and it's a $500 bump on a $10,000 watch, not so bad. But when you're looking at a $4,000 watch and it's a $500 bump,
Definitely.
A couple of years down the road, they'll be neck and neck with Omega.
Shifting that bar for position, right? And I think it's interesting because, like you say, Brent, it's Omega has also pushed their prices to kind of, create that allure of what it's worth. And then you can go back to that sales experience of getting a deal, because that's the thing is there is no margin, it's also hard to give you that feeling of this is a great deal. And I think Fortis is one of those situations where it's priced what it should be worth.
Yeah. The amount of level of attention to detail and the quality, the feel, it's really impressive. But when you're going back to Tudor, you're looking at the Pelagos, which started off as a $5,000-ish watch.
Mm-hmm.
It's now over $7,000.
Yeah,
for the same watch.
Well, I'll tell you what isn't a $7,000 watch is this RZE, and this is also the UTD 8000 that I have on wrist. So, and yes, I was sucking up to the guest.
Brent's the brown noser of the trio here.
But honestly, we talked about this. I don't know if you heard the last pod, Huey, but we did actually talk about this watch on the last pod, and I put it down as one of my favorites from the year. And this particular one, like the moment this came through the door, I thought, oh my God, this can never leave. I love that Cerakote, and I love the sort of the DLC and the matching hardware and everything that goes with it. And prior to that, I used to really like the negative display version. I thought that was really something. But the moment I saw this come in, the colorway just won me over. So that's what I have on wrist this morning.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. So thank you. You and I, Huey, we started off kind of our adult lives anyway, kind of similarly. We both worked in education before we found our way into watches. And looking back, how much do you think that those years, especially at Boyle Street, and maybe you could explain to our audience a little bit like what teaching at Boyle Street was like, what that school is like, is not like all other schools. How would that have maybe shaped the way you think about people, leadership, responsibility, and where you've landed now?
Yeah. So, I've always been a watch enthusiast and watch collector my whole life, and but it was always separate from my career. Like you, Mark, I think I've bought, sold, and traded. I don't have that thing anymore. Like I can just let something go, but it's also let me pare down my collection to kind of things that I'm really sentimental about, and it kind of leads me to that what Brent was talking about is that what's interesting is that I went into that profession of teaching with the sole intent of working with high-risk youth because my family came as refugees to Canada, and I have always lived in this kind of 2-kilometer radius in Edmonton of the city center core. And when I wanted to become a teacher, I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to work with the kids like, I guess like me or my friends and stuff coming up. And so I had the fortune of working at Boyle Street, and that was something that really kind of kept me grounded and kept me humble to kind of being aware of, more or less the everyman or the middle class, or kind of like, the everyday, I think, struggle. And it gives you kind of a perspective on what people value, and what it's like to want something versus need something. And I think that also kind of drove me in the hobby to be more particular and things like that. But eventually in my career, I became an administrator, and I have always, since a child, believed there's only one real Rolex worth owning, and it would be the day date 1803, because I believe that that's something that my dad as well believed in, and that all these things that were made handcrafted over time, and things you paid for without credit and stuff. And being a fan of hip hop and stuff, this 1803 is the watch that Tupac got, and it's all these gangsters and stuff of all time. It's the made men got that watch, and it would be something you worked for. And the date just is great, but the day date is the president. And so I hunted one, I found a single order Canadian one, and I thought to myself, like, I could give up everything in my watch journey for a day date. And when I accomplished that, it was kind of a capstone on my career too. I thought, like, I want to reward myself with something, and also kind of recognize that the best things are timeless. Like, it's 1803. I could have went and looked for anything, but I wanted, like, the original, just like I wanted to work at Boyle Street, which was the original charter school, to serve that audience. And when it, it grew to the point where politics or the meaning of it was becoming challenged, then I had to let it go. I wanted to pivot. And that's kind of like, I know that gets super metaphorical, but in reality, it's also kind of like watches and state of collections and stuff. Is there's reasons sometimes where you buy something and it has to identify with you or sing to you and be an identity part of you. And I think we should all be proud of that and decide, like, if it's not for us, we can walk away from it. We don't need someone to validate it and say, hey, like, your career is really good, like, why leave, because, like, you could just do this forever. It's like, yeah, but I don't love it, or I don't think it's going to be the thing for me forever. And it's okay to move on and accept that, like, hey, I had a chance to own this, or had a chance to do this thing, do it great, love it, do it well. And someone else will do that job just as well after me. Just like if you next week decide you don't want that Fortis anymore, Mark, the next guy who's going to wear it is going to have his honeymoon period for it. And I think the second that you kind of stay in a place for so long just because, it stops the story from continuing, and it also doesn't let that story kind of play out in a way where you get to be your true self, or that thing, the object, gets to live its true life, or whatever it is. And yeah, that's just kind of changed my philosophy on even how I build a brand, or how we kind of look at watches when we make them and stuff. Is like, we want to make the watches for the people that it's for, and it doesn't need to be for everyone. Just like I don't need to be a teacher or administrator for everyone. You can have a message, and the receiver doesn't have to be everyone. And it's, as an educator or as a orator, it's just like you guys talking about the podcast and stuff. Like, it's great to have a Canadian team that, obviously, if you're into watches, you can enjoy this podcast. If you're Canadian, you identify with it a little more. And then it's like, if you happen to not like Canadians, you're like, feel free, don't listen. And I think it's just one of those things where maybe as a teacher, and then as an administrator, working with people and kind of meeting them where they're at in all their capacities and stuff like that, has kind of changed the idea of buying something or owning a product or what it represents. Because every day we wake up and we have the opportunity to, never mind watches, you can put on a shirt or put on a jersey, and the second that someone sees you, they be like, hey, I know what you're about. And it's not about clout or anything like that. It's actually about connection. Because back in the day, you used to have a community, and you'd wake up and it's 200 people, and there's the doctor and there's the teacher, and people get different nods and respect because you know who they are. And there's a village idiot, and you respect that guy too because there's only a couple of them. Like, there's different things about it, but in reality, it's society has always been the same for thousands of years. And then now we have the opportunity to kind of have different flags for what represent us, whether it be sports or watches or whatever. And it's like, if that thing doesn't represent you or sing to you anymore, like, the world is so much bigger than that village. So just find your people. Go to the place where you're not treated like the village idiot, and then you'll wear the jersey that suits that thing or whatever. And if it doesn't suit you anymore, it's not about reinventing yourself or pretending. It's actually just being confident in your identity and knowing that it's not about the price of the thing or whatever. It's actually about just being as true to yourself as you can. And that's definitely changed my perspective on all those things. I feel blessed now every day to be able to do this thing, and work with people like, Brent and Bob and Mark. You guys are obviously passionate about this. And it's not about money. It's actually about choice and freedom of being able to say whatever you want to say about the thing and have an opinion, and not worry about someone's judgment and stuff. That's what watch wearing is all about. You can wear a pink watch, you can wear a purple one, you can do like what Isotope is doing, where it's like, I think I heard Jose say, like, what do you want to be known for? It's like, I want to be known for being different. It's like the things that are like, look at this booth, come up to it, and you'll see that all of these things are different. And actually, to have an identity of accepting, like, hey, my identity is that everything is different. That's great, because that must mean that is diverse enough for people to come and look. And if there's no offering there, that's for them. By all means, Jose would say it too. Okay, see you later. Like, maybe someday down the road, like, good for you. And I think that's important. I think that a lot of brands have to get to that place. And I don't know if it's about education or if it's about kind of just like seeing, especially in kids, that, like, regardless of who they are, they can like anything, they can find anything. And I think it's like Alan Watts, the Western Buddhist, would say, is that anything that you're interested in, if you go at it and you go down that road of practicing and learning and stuff like that, you'll find other people who also believe those same things, and you can be paid good money for those things if you want. It's just a matter of dedication and commitment and finding your people. So yeah, that's it.
It's interesting. I feel like I have to unpack a little bit some of those things you said, because you said quite a bit there. And one of the things I agree with wholeheartedly is that you come to a point, pivot, like you called it, and you think, I can no longer go on this way, or else I'm not going to be happy. And so you make that pivot. Caroline and I did that, of course, with education. It took us a little longer than it took you to make that pivot, but we just woke up one morning and realized that COVID had changed education so significantly that it just wasn't what we were into anymore, despite having had successful careers and happy careers. And so, we made that pivot. And, the other thing you talked about was flying a flag or having a tribe. And I really think that's an interesting way to look at it. When Andrew McCutcheon was on the show, he said to us after our wrist check, he said, I can tell a lot about you guys right now, like just by what it is that you were putting on your wrist. So I think that's really interesting. And, you may have also danced around this next question a little bit, but I'm going to ask it anyway, in case you have more to say about it. Obviously, the movement from being an educator into being a watchmaker is not, or an entrepreneur, let's call it, is not necessarily a direct line. So I'm curious, the experience that you had with disadvantaged youth, you had to be adaptable, you had to be have empathy and lots of patience. So does that change the way, or did it change the way that you approach building RZE or a brand in general?
I think one of the things about looking at like an independent brand or a micro brand, a lot of things that people talk about is cost, price point, right? I think that one of the things that I used to think about is that, and you guys will obviously think this is hilarious too, is that, because it's true, is that for 99% of people, an Invicta Homage or a dive watch to an average person's like, nice Rolex, it's not a Rolex. Oh, nice fake Rolex. Like, if it's not like a certain thing that they already know, it's like, if it's a dive watch, it's going to be a Rolex or not a Rolex. And I think or like now it's probably AP or Patek and stuff, especially among kids that listen to rap and stuff, right? And you kind of like look at it again, going to the everyman thing. And I think building a brand, we wanted a brand that would eventually be mainstream, because I think when I was talking to Travis about why in my entire life of watch collecting, I have never bought with my own money a micro brand or independent, despite having, followed them and read about things like Steinhardt and De Boffre and all the original, Rolex homages, as they rolled out. I've watched all these things happen, and it wasn't that I wasn't going to recommend them to friends who were collectors or anything like that. I certainly did. But I just personally didn't want to, because having collected watches for my entire life, like since I was 5 or whatever, um, Brett, you've heard these stories. Like I have Cartiers that I paid like $150 for. The Santos I have today, Gabo Santos 18K, like I paid $350 for, and that's now one of the few I have. And it's not to say like, oh, I've made so much money or I've come up ahead, because it's like the philosophy that you guys also know is that because I'm like Mark and have traded them away or have been disadvantaged, as a youth, or not disadvantaged, I guess, don't have the expendable income to be a collector when I was younger until I had a professional career. I had the fortune through knowledge and education to be able to trade up all the time and experience these things, but never own them. And so I had now the fortune to have a small collection of things. And so it was always hard for me to be like, oh, drop $500 on a thing that doesn't have history. It's kind of like the graphic t-shirt of the modern day. And so, it's the as seen on TV version of this. And I don't want to be like push my nose up to it, but that's just how my dad was. And that's the education and the information that was available to me. And that was the market at the time. eBay was a click away, and everybody knew you get a mediocre Speedmaster that was like unserviced for $500. Like, well, how are you going to say I'm going to buy anything else when you know that a Speedmaster was $500? I don't even own a Speedmaster now. I have a Seamaster with Speedmaster movement in it, but I don't even have a Speedmaster, because you know what? Being in the watch community, I know that I can go and see any of you guys at an event, and there's going to be Speedmasters I can touch, and I can appreciate them without owning them. And so going back to the question you had, Brent, is that like I wanted to create something like the UTD or something like that, that would be something that someone could have for a lifetime. God willing, these things that we make are worth more money than someday down the line, or retain their value or whatever. But what we want is for someone to have something that's for a lifetime, that they can pass on to someone, that maybe someone's going to Google down the road, and they can hand it to someone else, or they can pawn it or whatever. Not that they should, but I wanted something that had a brand with an identity that was going to be recognizable, so that a kid or somebody else could aspire to that thing. And because we know that the things of old, like Rolex and stuff like that, they're not attainable for the kids that I was teaching. That's like, or their kids even, probably. It's imaginary. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. They're certainly like, if they work hard and that's their life goal is to own a Rolex, yeah, sure. But Veblen goods are not things that are supposed to be every person things anymore. And neither is Omega or whatever. If they didn't sell aspiration, there wouldn't be a point for that. And I think that Hublot and Jean-Claude Biver taught me, so that I could remember these things, that like, no matter what the whole community says about Hublot, they don't care what you think. They sell 12 of them at retail to people who believe in what Hublot is, because they saw it on the corner of FIFA in 2000 or 99 or whatever. And those are going to be the people who are watching F1 and know, Ronnie Feig and Kith, and they're looking at Tag Heuer and they're like, man, that's sick. I know that my old man like had a Tiger Woods watch back in the day, and that was like the sick mall watch or Wolf of Wall Street or whatever. They know there's a big gap between like Rolex and Patek, right? They already know that, or Rolex and AP. The world is kind of in this weird place right now, where like they don't realize that gap between Timex and us or whatever, and that's actually the only space that matters, because that's the people who aren't wearing watches right now. if you can convince anyone to go from a F91 to spend double or triple that, or to like not wear an Apple Watch, whoa, you are like changing the world right now. Like that's the thing that should matter. And that's the kids, that's the education, that's the part of like realizing what's in. But if we're just talking about like, what's the modern Seiko 5 SKX like 007 these days? It's like, man, just like there's 6,000 videos from the last 10 years. Like Mark at Long Island already bodied that business. That's the reason why Islander is so good. Like, we don't need to talk about it anymore. You want to go down the AliExpress road, like, they can do that. Kids know what Temu is too. If they want to buy a rep Rolex, they can do that. And I think that's one thing that I think we also have to be really careful of getting caught up in, is that like manufacturing and the quality, even like you said, Bob, on the low end and stuff, is so good. And so if it gives a kid an opportunity to experience something really good that's not a fake or whatever, and it's a good price point, it's kind of their t-shirt, we should just be really proud. And that's changed the way that we change our messaging too, because I wanted all the things about our watches to be dinner table conversation. It's so a kid can say it's cool. Not many kids are going to sit around and be like, well, the lug to lug is about 42, and like the slope of the lugs just comes down just so. Like it's just not a thing. But it's true, right? It's great for every enthusiast to like it, but the nuance of changing it for the sake of changing it so that someone can have it a little bit better, so that you can get the last $400 out of the next guy, is crazy work. And I think we see that too much in the business. And there's too much. And I think, Brent, you heard me say when we first were at Toronto Timepiece Show, that to a lot of other brands and I guess media friends and insiders, that I want people to know that as brands, and I know that Jose would say this too, is that us of all people are not out there to try to eat anyone's lunch or convince people that our stuff's the best. There's plenty of brands doing great things, and we should just be celebrating other brands and what they do, because if we get into the weeds of like, oh, we got to get this last customer, it's never going to go. It's not a community thing. It's just like you're banging your head against the wall. It's like telling a kid that you got to memorize 2 times 2 is 4 and 4 times 2 is 8. And it's like, yeah, rote memorization works, but you know what else works? Like 4 2s is 8. I don't care how they say it. I don't care how they tell the time. Just tell the time. Tell me what time it is. Like, you guys have read Rebecca Struthers' book, and it's like, we're a long ways from when like people were like the man, and like only one man here has a clock. Like, we'll work until it's over. Like, it's just let people be, man. Like, people aren't telling people like, I think that's something that we're going to see. It's a big wave in that way, is that we'll see people just look at watches as personality. And I think that's a part where we have to just all get better at being excited about it.
Finally gave you the confidence to make that leap, to try and convince people of that, what was it that finally gave you the courage to say, look, I'm going to step away and give this a shot?
I think it's kind of like what you said about COVID and seeing that education's entirely different, is that everything is entirely different. And something that I've been passionate about all my life, and also seeing like that the micro brand or independent community was moving so fast, but no one was going slow to go fast. Like, like nobody was actually building a brand. They were building product, but they weren't building brand. And so when I talked to Travis about it, I said, there is so much Pinocchio and so much will never be the real boy. And that's why none of the micro brands have gotten my money. I was like, and he said, well, what does that even mean? I was like, if I take this leap, I will make it the real boy. And you'll see what it means, because a real boy has all those things, like the living, breathing features of something that people can connect to as a lifestyle, not just a product. It's not iPhones and computers we're selling. And that's often what reviews feel like, is it's a spec sheet of like, can you believe how many things I put into this under the hood? I get it. There's like McLarens and there's F1 cars and there's all these things, and those are great, but they're for very particular drivers. and just like your Fortis, Mark, or the Stratotimer and stuff like that, like those are for astronauts and stuff. And it's not that it's not for everybody. It's cool that you get a chance to do it. But when you kind of like the everyman looks at it, does a kid really know the difference between a Porsche Hot Wheel and a Lambo or a Gordon or like any of those cars that are like so stupidly inaccessible? And if we just pretend that all of those things are accessible, it's kind of roughly the equivalent of telling every kid they might make the NHL. It's just not true. And that's the thing with like the kids sometimes that we were working with and stuff, is that some teachers also have to remember that we all need to change our measurement of personal success and not project our personal success on what other people's happiness or what their goals are. Or, like if some kid just wants to make sure that they can do math so that they can be a cashier and like, kick it with their friends, and like they don't plan to have kids and they just want to live their life and do that thing. Who am I to judge that they're not going to aspire later and get sick of that? Get them the math so that they can go and get their job, because that's their current hope and potential. It's not that I'm diminishing who they might be able to be later. I'll encourage them and support them. But that's kind of like the reason why I took the leap, is that like in the end, how does a brand get there? Or how does anybody get there if I don't do that same thing? It doesn't mean that I need to be making big bucks or crushing it, but if I can every day be the cashier, hang with my buddies or whatever, sell watches, try to convince someone of this every day, and like talk to you guys during my work day, damn, like that's pretty good, right? And if I recently had a kid a couple of years ago, or like almost a couple of years ago, and I think that really changed my perspective too, is that like, I want to make something that he can see down the road is tangible, and that like you can also do this thing that creates what I hope to be a legacy. I hope that it's possible for brands to be born, and you can commit and do the thing as long as you put in the work. If you want to do a fly by night and do a $1 million product that retires you, I think that thing has long sailed. And I think that nobody really recognizes that on the internet anymore because the influencer world and stuff. But like in reality, I think you guys know as well, there's no watch, no jacket, no anything anymore that's going to retire a person. A singular product cannot be done. And let's say that they hypothetically could, because someone's going to listen to this pod like, oh no, definitely, I know this guy, like this, that guy could 1 million it and it would be over. Yeah, but like the sad reality of it is that if you could crush it so hard that you were going to turn it into your lifetime golden goose product, I sure hope that you own the entire supply chain of upward vertical for that thing. Because if you think that it's your golden goose and you think that you've gotten ahead of everybody else who's seen it and stuff like that, you're going to get knocked off in about 3 months, and that will be the end of that. If Amazon is looking at people's dog bags and whatever it is, everyone's like, yeah, that's small money though. It's like, no, go find out how many units Timex or Casio or anybody is churning out per month, compared to any of us, and we'll all stop fighting. like the big guys, or like Seiko, it's like Seiko can afford to kind of like do the discounting or make the 100,000 special editions that people want to complain about. Seiko will be fine, man. They could burn them all and they'll be okay. I think that that's something that you have to get to the point when you accept it, and then that'll make you fine with the leap. Is that there's 1,000 fan rule. You guys probably have heard this back in the internet a few years ago, and it was if anybody listening or you guys don't know, it's the 1,000 fan rule. Is the idea that if you can find 1,000 people who believe the thing that you believe and are your fan and they love you, let's say that you think you need $100,000 to run your life. You need 1,000 fans. That means you need every year $100 from each of those people. If you're a musician or whatever, that gives you, break it down by a number of days a year you want to do that. Like it's actually not that hard to just kind of make it. As long as we can be content in our day and be proud of what we do. And I think Brent, you and me and Carolyn, and I've talked with you at length about this, is that I do believe that if we accept that we have enough because we recognize the struggles of others and see what's around them, and kind of like what we're being content with, it's like you actually liberate yourself entirely, and you break it down to the 1,000 fan theory, and you start living like, oh, like if I do it like that and I pay tax, fine, like I got to do this much. And if I don't just randomly buy a 8,000 watch and I just trade one that's sitting in my house already, then I'll be okay. I can still get to experience that, and I don't need to own them all. That's a game changer, man.
No, we do need to own them all. So let's take a tiny step back here. Your partner, Travis, was one of the original founders of Boulder Supply Company. While doing some research myself, the AI said that RZE is an offshoot of Boulder. Of course, we all know AI summaries don't paint an accurate picture, and I'm sure there's a bigger story to this. So, what is that story? How did that all start, and how did you get involved at the very beginning?
Yeah, I can't go deep into how Travis left Boulder. Obviously, that's a previous relationship with them. But I think as he was primarily the designer component of that, and I think they just had a mutual separation of ways. And I think that led to Travis thinking about how he wanted to design a brand around the things that he really wanted to push his design on. So you see there's an Angular design language from some of the watches over at Boulder that obviously are his influence. But then when he moved to RZE, he had that perspective already of wanting to create a specifically outdoor brand that was going to have the titanium that would be scratch proof. And it was around the time that sorry, not scratch proof, scratch resistant. But it was around the time that Traska and all these, like, Dia Shield, all these other kind of like clear PVDs and stuff like that were coming out. And Travis being an engineer and a pilot, and he's just kind of being in the aerospace industry. And you guys probably know, Brent knows, I have a aerospace, like one of the original minute repeater aerospaces and stuff. Like, I just love these kind of things. Travis loves these things. And the major complaint of those would be that they would tarnish and they would like look all scratched up and stuff like that. The only one that around that time would differ really would be maybe the Pelagos. I mean, there was still like SBDB 001 or 11, the titanium divers that were like pre-GS, that were titanium over at Seiko and stuff, were kind of going into the territory of kind of like some kind of coating, but it wasn't really in a microbrand thing other than Traska and stuff, or in stainless steel. And so Travis put it upon himself to like want to solve that with a USP and say, like, I want to make it Ultra Hex 1200 hardness Vickers, try to find a thing that would work for titanium, and then focus on the tolerances and find a way to make that work. And so that's kind of the birth of RZE. And so when he created that, he had been working with Kirk. You guys may know him, Kirk Lepton, on Instagram, and he was the original photographer who's now our creative director. And he had met me through Instagram as well, just kind of through the watch community and stuff, casually, as a collector and as an enthusiast. And so he was talking to Travis casually about kind of like what Travis's brand direction was, because as a creator and as a creative and someone here based in Canada and stuff, he thought it was a great product, but he wanted a vision of brand. And so he was shooting EDC and stuff like that. And obviously the gap between EDC flat lays and actual user, photography and stuff, like Brent is a, prime example. It's a big leap from his basement or wherever to going out in the wild and doing it. And that's why it's like, it's so impressive. Like the stuff that he does, you can't just do it. I think, Brent was like, I saw that the skiing thing you did with Longines, like you're deleting stuff off your card or whatever. You're like, yep, harder than you thought. Like, like it's one of those things where I think, even when you're a watch brand, you think about how much it costs to create creative around something to make it real. And it's not just Travis, it's everybody in the industry they'll tell you how much it's not worth it to make it look real or whatever. Like they don't understand the gap sometimes even or whatever. And so Kirk was just telling me to talk to Travis about what it takes to go to from Pinocchio to Real Boy. And that's kind of what led me to it. And what kind of made me turn on the switch to say, I'm going to do this is like the potential of creating an outdoor brand or lifestyle brand that is like truly represents, a lot of the aspects of who I am as a person, trying to work on sustainability and integrating rewilding Canadian Indigenous lands and planting trees on shelter belts and supporting STARS Air Ambulance and stuff. Those are all parts of me as an individual, but as a Canadian as well. But I know that those are all wholesome stories that make a brand real to all those people who are users as well as to people who are all around the world. They're like, man, STARS Air Ambulance, is like what happens when you crash on a highway in remote Canada in Alberta or like and it's freezing -40. Oh, that's what happens. A helicopter comes and they pick you up. Or like if you go hiking and you break your leg or something and there's no National Guard, what happens? These people come and get you. Those are stories that need to be told, just like flying doctors at Oris or anything like that. And when you look at, again, going to Jean-Claude Beaver and all of these legends of the industry of the heyday of watch marketing, these are the madmen of that industry, is like they were telling stories. They weren't telling specs. They were paying $1 million for the right to put something on James Bond's wrist. And I hate to tell it to people, but it's like James Bond hasn't been relevant for a long time for a lot of young people. Like, it's just like, if that's not relevant to them, what is? And you know what is experience. It's like, go on Instagram, like see what people are looking at especially as kids. They want to be outside. They might not be actively getting outside, but they're seeing this stuff around the world and being like, that's incredible. That's beautiful. I want to be there. And then it's not because the person climbing the mountain happens to be Nims Dai or something like that they're going to want to go up there. It's cool. It's Nims Dai. But you know what? When it's Nims Dai, it makes it super inaccessible. You start thinking like, damn, I got to be on Netflix to climb that mountain. You don't. You just have to be a guy with legs that happens to be in Alberta. And, like, it doesn't matter. And that's the reason why, if you look on our website and stuff like that, there's people who are like, maybe they're like minor influencers or whatever, but they're actually all people who are dedicated to their job of doing the thing, of like being explorers or outdoor adventurers and stuff, because those are actually the people who are going to give you the real results. And what's ironic about it and challenging with all watch brands to find the authentic content is that it's kind of like asking a guy who is like doing roofing to take pictures of him up there roofing. If you were roofing, like any of us guys, I'll include myself. If I was roofing, 1,000,000% I'm up there and someone has gotten a picture of me roofing with my watch. But that's because I don't roof every day. It's because I'm never doing that thing that someone is going to take a picture of me doing that thing. If your job is roofing, you have no idea why in the world anyone would be taking a picture of your wrist. You wouldn't have a camera up there. There's 10,000 reasons why the guy is not getting a picture of an authentic thing. Extrapolate that to every single solitary thing that every watch has ever been themed about ever in 1,000,000 years, like since the beginning of time. It's like, how many deep seas have been down to the Marianas Trench? Just one. That one. The one that James Cameron took. That's the one. How many other ones have been diving? Probably less than are, really anybody wants to admit, because there's probably a million of those. So, I think that it's a crazy thing when you try to close that gap, how big you realize that gap is.
Mm-hmm. So what's in the name? How did you arrive at the name RZ or RZE and the tagline "Assembled for Adventure"?
So initially, Travis being industrial design and German design, like it's a nod to Zinn and stuff like that, like the H-Link bracelet and stuff. And so the original name was RZE. It's a German word for travel or travel. And I think there was some trademark stuff, and there was also some individual like community members and stuff. They're like, yeah, it's kind of weird, kind of like a word mark that like um, it could be any word or whatever, and maybe took a little bit too much explaining and stuff. And so Travis was thinking about like what you could compress it to, kind of, and then it resulted in RZE. I wish it was more sexy than that, but it's kind of like breaks it down to that. And then, but the idea of being assembled to adventure is really because they wanted to be an adventure brand and have the rough, durable, modern technology and stuff be represented in that. And so even as we kind of started building the brand, we kind of focused in on highlighting the logo and stuff like that. And I think sometimes some people struggle because they, until the UTD, there wasn't necessarily what people believe to be an iconic watch or anything like that. And it's not that we didn't have design language that a watch community and stuff would understand, but you guys will chuckle, is like, this is evidence of what we know from having a mainstream audience that a lot of people don't necessarily believe, is that because we have no questions asked returns or whatever, we have the Tritanium program, we have a lot more people who just like buy a watch, send it in back when they don't like it or they try it on. And we have a 36, we have a 38, we have a 40. People just order the one they like. They don't know size. They don't know the difference. In fact, they think they all look the same. And I know that hurts people's souls, but you know, for the number of people that have told us that they don't understand why their watch is dead is because it's mechanical, or they didn't realize that the 36 is indicative of the size. They should have bought the 38, the 44. Like, we've had people that should have bought the Aspirare that bought the 36. It's like, cool field watch. It's like, wish I would have bought the 38. It's like, still not going to get there, buddy. Like your 8.5-inch wrist is just not the ticket. But it's better to, sometimes it's better to guide people than to kind of like tell them what they can and can't do. And I think that that's something that yeah, it's just, that's the thing.
So first of all, did you guys actually sell watches under RZE? I feel like
Yeah.
You did, yeah, because I think I actually had a couple in like loaners for content at one point in time. I'm just remembering that all now. But so for anyone listening, I've seen, including you guys, brands right from the very early days, a lot of failures, some really big successes too. But is there anything that for somebody that's maybe dreaming of starting their own watch brand, is there any lesson you learned the hard way maybe that could help?
Ourselves and everybody else has learned everything the hard way, I think. And I think that
that's true.
Whether anybody wants to tell anybody what they've learned the hard way or not, I think is the challenge. And I'm always open telling people what we learned the hard way. And I think that the thing that people have to get is that people will outwork you when you're sleeping. If you know, the easiest way to compare it to is that, because it is a commodity now, like, is that there's a lot of factories that can make watches, and they're over there sitting there waiting for you to want to make a watch. You know, for all of the people who are just saying there's just parts in China, or there's parts in Switzerland, or parts in whatever. It's like, yeah, there's parts in Switzerland. I don't care if they're made in Switzerland or made in China and then finished in Switzerland or whatever. Parts are parts are parts are parts, and there's lots of them everywhere. What you decide to do in your passion for the hobby, whoever that is that wants to start a brand, you need to know what that is and the reasoning why you want to do that and who you want to do it for before you even start. If you want a watch that's for you and it's like bespoke and it's like exactly what you want, I think if you temper your expectations of assuming that other people out there in the world want it for you, want that same thing as you as well, like, it's great, because you're right. There's probably someone else who wants it, but it's all transparent now. Like Mark had mentioned, ChatGPT and stuff, everybody knows it's roughly 300 units, give or take, is the minimum run for something. And using the 1,000 fan theory, you can mathematically think about how much profit, quote unquote, you can make if you sell all of those watches at the margin that you know, being compared to AliExpress and whatever it is going to be. And then people can decide for themselves. But I think it's easy to get caught up with like the idea that you're going to be able to crush it because you've seen all these other brands do it. It's just the same as a graphic t-shirt. It's just a different barrier of entry. If you have $30,000 to burn, not you, but you know, if anybody has $30,000 to burn, and not burn as in throw away, but just like, hey, I have an expendable income, you may want to think like, do I want one watch that I really want for myself and it's a grail? Like, you could have stainless steel AP birth year, undesirable, no box, no papers, for that 30K. And I bet you could get most of that back and you could enjoy it really a lot. You could really enjoy that AP. And you'll never have to worry about selling 299 people on why that watch that you have is as good as that AP. I think that's the hard advice in the easiest way, because the other part of that is like, take it to coffee shops and think about a coffee shop and think about how much the margin is on a cup of coffee, and think about all the artisan coffee shops that are out there, roasters and stuff like that. Great guys. They're passionate and they're willing to go and spend time in that coffee shop in the morning to serve all their customers and to clean up, wash the dishes, do all those things. And then at the end of the night, they want to stay there and roast the beans, and they want to set them aside so they whatever, and then they want to bag them. And so there's obviously Shapiro, and he's getting paid a lot of money to do that. And then there is other brands maybe where they're smaller, and Weiss, Cameron Weiss, for example, and that, you know, a little bit bigger scale. And then maybe your Colorado watch and your different scale and stuff. And you start comparing to these people and the things that they've done and how much they're committed. And then you start scratching your head and you think to yourself, you're like, it's like a coffee shop. If you're not willing to do every single part of that process, from washing the dishes to roasting the beans, there is someone out there willing to do it, and they're already really good at it, and they're already being paid to do it. If you need to learn all those steps, or you're unwilling to pay anybody for any of those steps, you're going to make compromises. It's like the creative and stuff like that. It's like, we can't be good at all things. We can't all be good at writing copy and taking pictures and making videos and whatever. Anybody can get on a website and find different watches. I like Lumicast. I like LPJ. I like this, and make a list and throw it in to a bunch of quotes and find the manufacturers on League of Microbrands, or get some advice and give it a go. And to be honest, it's like any of these higher end manufacturers are going to give you roughly the same product and stuff like that. So cycling back to the other part, think about the roughly 30 grand that you may have, and then ask yourself, do you want to watch for you, or do you have something to give the world? Because if that's something you have to give the world, then I really question what that is and what that represents, because you're going to have to be able to sell it better than, look at my Samsung, you know, S9. It has 8 gigs of RAM. It has you know, plays music really good. Who cares? I have an iPhone.
Looking back at your first Kickstarter launch and where the product line is now, what's one unexpected lesson or in design or engineering you've learned?
I think a good example is like when we got to was the Resolute Pro, but is now phased out from being called the Resolute Pro. There was a time where we revisited that launch product, or what is now our flagship, the Resolute, and we went to it and we elevated it. You know, we'd already had technological advances and stuff like that, but we brushed it. Then we put in the enamel dial and applied indices, and then you know, sold it for a little bit of a premium, but what it was worth. I think enamel dials at that time in 2022 or something weren't that common in a field watch yet. It wasn't like suddenly the big thing. And there was like an investment in coming back to a model that was fundamentally the same. You know, it's recognizable as that thing, and you're able to kind of market it to a new audience, and people are still buying the Sunburst or the fume one and stuff like that, because there's different strokes for different folks. But if you let it run out of inventory, kind of like you think that you're generating demand, but you're not, because there's a lot of people out there that are just looking for the thing and they want it to be available. And so the hype thing or whatever, or kind of thinking like it's always got to be fresh and new all the time, it's not true. And I think that's something that was really important to kind of like learn and also recognize and understand. And I think that going back to the first time that Brent and I had that event as well, as I told people that Alongazana is not going to tell you like last year's model or 10 years ago's model or whatever, that it's no good anymore. It's junk. We've moved on from it, or we've moved up, or whatever. Or like even Patek, like they're not going to, they'll send you the archive. It's like we thank you very much for taking care of this for the next generation. They're not going to tell you which version was better or whatever. And I think that as micro brands and stuff, because the cycle and the social media noise and all those things happen so quickly, we're hard on ourselves as owners and as makers and stuff like that to believe that we need to keep up with the Joneses in technology or pricing or something. And it's like, you don't. You just need to trust your audience and know that if people believe this thing and you tell people the right story and you stay true to it, they'll tell other people, and that word of mouth is real. And you guys are the perfect example, is that you guys just started here, heard about us, like it, and support us, and it's easy to just continue to tell that story. You don't have to relearn a story. You don't need to learn more things. I think that's actually the beauty in it, is that if you just trust in it and you do the thing consistently, you don't need to change it. The tech is so good. It's like anybody going back to a Rolex and telling me that the modern version with the ceramic and stuff like that's the best one. It's like, no, it's the best for today, but it's not the best one.
Yeah.
The best ones were not made by robots. I'm glad that they're technically the best, but where's the charm knowing that there's about like 700,000 of them that came out this year in that colorway that are now sitting in safes somewhere? Who cares? Like, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't. And if you enjoy it, I want you to enjoy it. It's not that I don't think that people should enjoy them, but if we treat them as stores of value or measure them on greatness based on newness, it's kind of like looking at a bunch of cars that you never drive. Don't get the rally car if you're not going to take it and rally it. Just call an Uber every day and save everyone the trouble. Save yourself the pocketbook.
That's a good one.
I think that the audience can already sort of tell that that RZE, they don't chase trends. They sort of commit to ideas. And you've given us a lot of ideas here this morning. But like, you guys have sort of committed to the titanium case. That's what you do. You committed to Ultra Hex. It's what you do. And then you decided to commit to solar quartz with the Urbanist. And now that's something that you do. But maybe the boldest of all those decisions was going with the UTD, because that is really outside the enthusiast sphere. And I know that you guys are aiming for something well beyond the enthusiast sphere. So what gave you the confidence to say, yeah, we can do this? Because like this is neck and neck with things like G-Shock, So what was that decision-making process like? And how has it been?
I think Casio and Seiko and Timex have a lot of lunch. I think that's it's like scratching a little bit of that digital is actually like a territory where it's other people aren't chasing it, and it's kind of like going back to Ultra Hex is kind of furthering what we do. And looking at the tool watch, we found that with the mainstream audience, they're asking for things like what I mentioned at the beginning. Is like, well, it dies. Like, what? I have a digital watch. Like, I want something that's a little bit different, like has a little bit of je ne sais quoi, but it's like, it's like, it's, if you want a G-Shock, you can get a G-Shock, but you want to have something a little bit discerning or whatever. And that's something that we wanted to offer. And so growing up as lovers of like Sunto and Timex and stuff like that, and talking to Kirk was the one who was the main driver of like, well, why not? Like, why shouldn't we? And Travis and I sat and talked, and Kirk, and we talked about what was available and what it would take and stuff. And we thought really hard and long about the reality was that like if we went down that road and we really committed, probably we could get ahead of anybody else who is doing it, not just from a technological standpoint, but from a branding standpoint. As a tool watch that's titanium and stuff, it's a gap. And I think that there's a way that we can find an opportunity to fill it. And I think that one of the big complaints was like from the community or enthusiasts and stuff is like, oh, it doesn't do this, and it doesn't do this, and it doesn't do this, because I have a G-Shock. It's like, but what we were really good at is committing to the fact of like just acknowledging, like, we know it doesn't do that. I had to do it in the way where it's like the lowest barrier of entry for us, while we could focus on the thing of making it as tough as infinitely possible and guarantee it for life, rather than say I can make it do all these things. Because if I want to make it do all those things, G-Shock already has that. No one's going to help you create the thing. It's not like you said, Mark, LPJ, like you can't just go buy a movement and say like, when it's digital, I think the biggest criticism that killed us was like, people be like, well, it just looks like this that's put in there. It's like, find me some digital watch where it's so easy to just take it out and put it in there. There's not, one does not simply take something out and put it in. And it's not like an NH35 or whatever. And any customization is custom. I don't care what anyone says. Any customization is custom. Go change your monitor so that it can like only display in yellow. Like, good luck. Like it's just things that people don't get, right? And so, but moving to the titanium thing is like, we focus on the idea of like re-engineering or remanufacturing a way to make it shock resistant, vibration resistant, answering the call of what people were saying. Like we wanted, what I needed is like no cold fade out and things like that. And at the end of the day, we want a watch that doesn't judge you. We know that you can have a sport watch that, you know, has connectivity and stuff like that. But this is just like, it's just for the fact of what we were talking about. Some operators or different kinds of people that just need the time and need it really legible. There isn't something modern and discerning for that. And if we just send it, I think we could carve out our own niche, eat a little bit of Timex and Casio and Seiko's lunch and stuff, and that would do it. I think that how it's going is definitely great in the context of how many thousands of people we've now gotten these watches on their wrists. I think from a business standpoint, in a business case, it's still a challenge, because like the marketable audience for this, of compelling people to pay more than they would pay for a G-Shock, or to even know the difference of why titanium is better without knowing. Because like, you know, I hate picking on you, Mark, but it's just like you had all these tidbits that are so easy to grab from. Is like the Pelagos versus the Fortis right now, or whatever, like the weight difference. You look at the size of a UTD and you think like that's going to be big and heavy and stuff. And then you're like, people don't know how different the weight in titanium is, or how it's going to wear or whatever. And I think that that's where the investment on our end is going to come from, is that if we're in this long enough, then people will be able to realize and see how good it is, but it takes time. And so I'm really proud of what we've done and what we've accomplished, because it was the fastest selling model. It's now like by volume getting to be kind of what has sold the most. It's not just fastest selling. It's going to be the by volume the most. And I know that we can keep doing it because we're going to keep the price kind of relatively reasonable. Like we're going to try to keep it here. And I know that people are going to say it's so expensive and stuff, but the reality is that some things just cost what they cost. And we don't have a aggressive discounting strategy and different things. And I think this is another thing that, I mean, I committed to kind of prove it to everybody, is that we take trade-in, right? Trade-in on anything, in any condition, anytime. As long as it's one of our watches, you get a fixed amount. And so if we increase our prices, you'll get the percentage based on current MSRP, then you can make the decision. And our pre-owned section is very fixed. It's like, this is the pricing. And so it's no smoke and mirrors. That's kind of how we invest in our future, because I think that if we kind of look at it from a standpoint of we'll win in the end, kind of takes the stress off.
Great.
And I disagree. Your prices are very aggressive. They're not overpriced at all. If you look at what G-Shock offers in the MRG lines for the quality bracelets that you offer with the micro adjust on the clasp, the hardness coating on stuff, I think they're priced exceptionally well.
Agreed.
Thank you. And I mean, We definitely do too, but I think that the problem is that the non-enthusiast is always going to compare us to an Apple Watch or an Apple Watch Ultra or a Garmin. And, we've talked about trying to make our watches like Whoop compatible or something like that, like, something else that is going to allow it to be kind of active without diminishing the size and make it accessible. But the problem is, I guess, therein lies with just how hard it is to convince someone to even consider comparing it to an MRG, right? Is the difference between like a full metal collector to a D5610 to a 5600 and then all the way up to MRG. It's so tough. I think that's the even as a G-Shock enthusiast myself, I don't know if you guys are aware, but like the full metal that has a crystallized titanium or whatever that is like still double the price of the regular full metal is not even titanium. It's just crystallized titanium coated, and that G-Shock owner for some reason doesn't care. And that's a challenge where I'm actually still trying to unlock that code. Maybe that's one of the things that Bob's referring to is like, what are we learning the hard way is that the brand loyalty for G-Shock, if we think brand loyalty for Seiko, like Grand Seiko is crazy, the brand loyalty for G-Shock is insane. And I know that, like, I love it too, but it's almost like a betrayal. Like, it's like so many people, like we found it's funny because one of the first criticisms we knew going in, like Brent is, we went with the negative display and the color palette, which homages G-Shock to an extent. And still, if you know Sunto and stuff, you'll look at the GR and you start looking and you're like, oh, they took nods from all these other digital models, or the original MRG is very similar actually to some of the layouts and stuff. And Fratello is the biggest one where they're like, or like people were really heavy on it. It's like, oh, they ripped off G-Shock. It's like, we didn't rip off G-Shock, or we didn't have it like somewhat similar so that people could even like know it familiarly. It would be such a turnoff for so many people. Like for the mainstream, they want it like that. Just like Invicta sub homages have to look mostly like a sub. It's like even the date complication. So I was like, oh, like it only shows in the American way. It's like mathematically think of all the people that we market to in the world, and then think of how much harder it is to include a manual with the watch and expect people to have a manual so that they can change it to the thing they want versus just accepting that like, nah, I think they know how many months there are in the year and how many days there are. And unfortunately, if that's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, we're just not going to get that sale because the margin on that is like the UTD is like our French fries. It's really our hope of mainstreaming that thing and then knowing that the flagship is the other thing. And the way that I plan the brand as I've kind of worked into it, like you said, you mentioned the Urbanist and the Valor 38 that I mentioned earlier. And the whole goal is to have what we had happen, Mark, is to trade in our watches, our own watches, have people enter the brand at UTD and then decide like when the price has gone up a little bit to trade it. Maybe they trade it for a pre-owned and they trade up and then go to mechanical and they're like, oh no, it's okay. Like, I'll just trade up to this mechanical and try it out. We're not expecting people to own them all. I hope that a bunch of people who are enthusiasts support us and love the thing that we're doing and look at our Cerakote and collect them all. But actually what I'm trying to do is make it easy for young people and stuff to enter the brand and be brand loyal for a lifetime.
For a watch like the UTD, like what's the time frame like when it comes to coming up with that idea when you guys were first chatting about it with Kurt and Travis to actually shipping? Is that a couple of year process or?
Yeah, I mean, the UTD was probably the longest one because it is like more complex. And so it was over a year for sure. But I think that you guys know in the microbrand world, it's gotten faster and faster and faster. And it's just like if you're able to push it and you can frankly pay, it's that's what it is. People are waiting to try to make it happen. And so as long as you're really committed to kind of pushing on it, you can get there. And so over about a year and a half or so, and then now kind of as we dev and work on stuff, the updates will be challenging. And I think that that's the part where we continue to kind of like push on, is thinking about what our capacity is to change things and update things. And it takes ourselves kind of pulling back on the patience things for ourselves and thinking about it in the context of like, okay, yeah, like do we kind of rush this, or do we go slow to go fast?
And do you guys, like, when you're coming up with the design, you get to maybe the prototyping phase of things, do they fail often? Like, we're okay, this isn't going to work, and they never see the light of day? Or do you find most of them will go to market, your designs?
With the colorways and stuff, we have been really good about making sure that they're exactly what we wanted. I think the design phase, we were also super careful. There was like I think maybe 2 prototypes. We had some changes, and we had some module changes and stuff like that. So certainly we had some swaps, but the case was fundamentally there. We changed kind of like the way the back engraving, the resolution of it was and stuff, because obviously the production versus the the prototyping was a little bit different there, as well as like a little bit in terms of the geometry and stuff like that to fit our bracelets, because as you guys know, our bracelets on our UTD fit our Endeavor as well as it fits our Resolute and stuff, because we want it to be universal. And so when you're working with something, trying to make it universal, that's the challenge, right? And so that's where we did actually come into the biggest problems of making everything play nice. That was the toughest part.
RZE has often felt to me like more than just a watch brand, or more than just a watch, I should say. I told you before the show started that I was listening to the Ariel Adams podcast that you did. And one of the things that he commented on was the fact that a lot of people, they make a great product, and some people make a great brand, and rarely do the two meet. And when they do, then you really see something that's going to be enduring, I think. And I know that you've talked to me about the idea of becoming the 100-year brand, like that, long after you're gone, hopefully RZE is still around, and people are buying it, and people are maybe even have the original, because those mechanical watches should stand the test of time. So I'm curious, like, you guys have really built this sense of community. I'm not sure that it was there in the early days, but certainly since you've come online, or we have people that follow you. They have similar values, similar interests, similar lifestyles. And one really good example was in Toronto. You walked in, and I think we were going to talk about meeting up later or whatever, and you had Trevor, who's written for us a few times on the Calibrated Wrist, and 2 of his buddies. And those 3 guys couldn't have been more stereotypically the people I thought that will show up with Huiy and would buy an RZE watch. And the EDC crowd, the guys that just love these, they're not looking for a JLC. They just want something that's tough, that will stand the test of time, that they can throw on in the morning and do whatever it is that they do for a living. And you kind of have that crowd now. How intentional was that on your part to get that group?
Is entirely intentional. I think that's something that Kirk was really, that's his wheelhouse, is EDC. Like, he's also he was definitely photographed more knives and more gear and stuff like that. That's definitely his wheelhouse. But it's both him and I's area of interest, and as well, kind of as Canadians that love the outdoors and stuff like that. Like, Brent, I can't stop talking about knives and flashlights and all these things, because it is part of the lifestyle. And I think that when you work with kind of that mindset of what it's supposed to be used for, you start to gravitate towards those people, and you think it becomes a lot more authentic as well when you're taking the pictures. When you look at a flat lay, we're so particular about kind of, the GR is kind of the best example. We thought about it, and it's like, oh, you want to put a Swiss Army knife in there, maybe some Altoids, these things, because it nods to an era, but also not just nodding to the era and the timelessness of those things and the everyday carry things in your pocket. But you also need to be discerning with the price point and the accessibility of the other things in the picture. If you just send the thing to a photographer and you say, I want to make this look rough, or whatever. It's just not going to be it. Or like when we look at the Valor 38 and you look at what we're doing with it, Super 73, it's like a electric dirt bike, and that's kind of like, that's the crowd of someone that might be more spec driven, that might be wanting something that's a modern version of a field watch. Or like if we were looking at again the Valor 38, the things that we have, it's like if you go camping and you have a Valor 38, you might be using an AeroPress to make your coffee, and you might be, have a BioLite stove for when you're camping. You might wear Columbia. Like, yeah, can we get Arc'teryx and Canada Goose? Sure. But the guy who's wearing Arc'teryx and Canada Goose is a Fortis lover. Like, we can't all be Fortis lovers. Like, but like, but it's sorry, jab. Always got to jab at you, Mark. But it is something where if you have a watch that is of a certain level price, that guy's not shopping at Decathlon or whatever. And I think that's the real trick. And it's not a trick, it's just awareness. And I think when you and me were talking about it, Brent, for what we want to do for events and things like that, it's also trying to be authentic to that, and then that way it's easy. This is personal, and I think it was a challenge for the brand as well, is like when we're pushing into the sustainability aspect of it, sometimes the reality is that sustainability doesn't move the needle. People don't care as much about sustainability as they say they do, but as Canadians, we value it and we appreciate it. And especially when it comes to the rewilding of Indigenous lands, like I do really believe in it, because it's like, if I can do 1% for the planet, or whatever, doesn't matter what charity we do, it is way easier for me to take $5-6, donate it to a company that I know and trust, that's going to help build, like plant a shelter belt outside of Calgary, so that their farmland doesn't just blow away, so that so the wind doesn't blow over it. And when we were launching the campaigns and stuff like that, few people are like message, support or whatever, it'd be like, why don't you just stop with the woke poop and make watches? And I think that that's a challenge, especially like for Travis and stuff, because we're an international brand, but like our customer service team and stuff, like that's not their backyard. And so like getting messages like that, you don't know how to deal with them, but in reality, you just have to ignore them, because we're going to alienate people. And that's a challenge, is that people aren't always going to like you. We're adults, but at the same time, our egos and things hurt. Like, and especially when you're a brand owner, you think like, why don't you want to buy my thing? Is that thing that going to be the reason that tips? Like, you've already gotten to my webpage, you believe these things, and now because we plant trees, you're like, man, kick dirt? That's crazy work. But that's a thing where it's so hard to kind of like take the ego out of it, but you have to be really just like find your people and stick to it. If we change our mind and suddenly decide we don't want to plant trees, like what does that say to the people who bought in because they wanted that, or who that they believe in, and how does that make me look to my kid? Because in reality, at the end of the day, it's not that all of these decisions are so high stakes, but for people who look at brands that come in for the brand standpoint and not the product, we have to preserve the thing that they believe in, because the specs speak for themselves. These things are built to last a lifetime. It's like, I don't need to lie or compel you or convince you about any of those things. Sapphire, sapphire, sapphire. Don't care what people tell you. Like those things aren't going to change. But the characteristics, the pictures and stuff, I don't want people to come back and find themselves alienated from the identity of the product. And I think that you guys especially have seen in your lifetime, there's brands that you grew up with as kids and stuff that have maybe gone to the outlet or they're defunct and stuff. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't mean that they don't represent something important to you, but that story dies, and that's sad. It's like Hudson's Bay in Canada is probably the saddest story to me as a Canadian to go under, and like it's a double-edged sword of having Canadian Tire take it over, in my opinion, because the quality and I'm sure that they'll still license the same wool and stuff like that, but it's a blow. It's just like any other watch brand that gets bought up. It's just like watching Zodiac get liquidated with Fossil. We don't want to see these things happen. But this happens because of commercial enterprise. And I think that, you know, going back to the advice for anyone starting this, thing, Bob, I think a lot of people have to decide if they're wanting to do this as a job or a vocation, or what they want to give and for how long they're willing to commit and what they want to do. Because, you know, when the other foot drops or whatever, is like, if the money is not coming, are you going to take all those watches and break them down? Because you can't go to Ross or you can't go to Winners or whatever and drop them off and get your stock price back or whatever. It's a consequence you're gonna have to accept. And it's not that I'm not trying to be disparaging and say people won't make it, but the brand has to be something that you can be proud of so that you can know what you're going to do with it if it doesn't go the way you think it is, because that's still supposed to represent something. I think, you know, taking it to another Canadian brand or whatever, Herschel out of Calgary, you know, making bags like Jansport and stuff like that, inspired by Japanese design. I think you guys have all seen Herschel bags. They've been popular for a few years. They could have been like, you know, a Canadian brand that we were all kind of like, wow, like this could have eventually elevated and pushed up, but it wanted to be accessible, which is also great. I don't want to disparage that, but then you end up in outlets and stuff like that. And what was kind of a club where everybody knew what it meant and what it represented then goes to licensing, and everyone has it. But then is it still the thing that it once was? Like, is it, and it's not that it's not cool anymore. It's the same thing as Levi's at Costco. Are the 505s as good as the 510s? Because they're at Costco. It's like, well, they're still Levi's, but like, do you want the person who really got in because they loved it to have a different product if they go to Costco? That's 100 years down the line already. But no micro brand has been around long enough to betray anybody, in my opinion. I don't think any micro brand or independent deserves to betray their audience at this point. There's just not enough money to turn their back on people. And I think that there's a few brands that we know where founders have been pushed out and stuff like that, and or whether they've been pushed out or not. I mean, biggest obvious one, I just say Christopher Ward. Christopher Ward's not a Christopher Ward anymore. And Christopher Ward is a very different animal than it was before, but at the same time, still making great watches, really diverse for enthusiasts and stuff. But it's taken 25 years or whatever to do the thing. They've shot their shot, failed it, shot their shot again, failed it, shot their shot, hit it. And now they're hitting it well. And Mike is the boss. And there's all kinds of things there that have made that thing work the way that it's worked. But the guy who started it's no longer there. And sometimes if you love something, you got to let it go. Just like what we're talking about teaching, is maybe someone will do a better job of this, but it's certainly not the way. I don't want to let it go when someone can go and turn their back and switch the script on what RZE is. And that's the reason why when you say like when we say something that we're going to do something, we go like the most extreme. It's like lifetime warranty on this, really hard to backpedal on that. If anybody like buys the brand, they decide like backpedal on UTD, it's like someone must have bought the brand. That's a weird backpedal. That's as simple as it is, right? Is that it's not to think that we don't necessarily believe that someday it will be bought or acquired or something. Is that we're also building with the recognition of how do we preserve this for 100 years without having someone turn their back on it and alienate people. And that's a challenge of thinking like, if the wheels fall off, how do we keep it alive? And that's why we do the trade-in program and all these things, where I've made a pointed note to go so far down the line that when you start pulling it apart, people have to make a choice. They have to sit down and think like, is it worth telling people it's not guaranteed for life just so that you can not replace that movement? Probably not. It's just not worth telling people no.
That's awesome, man.
What's interesting to me, and you've talked about it already, and you've brought up these initiatives, you have things like the Re-Verified program, you have things like Project Forest, and you have, your broader sustainability efforts. and they're really they are baked into the brand now. They don't really feel like they're added on, and we can even hear from what you've already said about them that those are just things that you even personally stand for, and we understand why, given your where you've grown, where you've lived in Canada, and where you've even worked, for example, in Edmonton. Is it possible, do you think, for a brand to be successful without those outside initiatives, without standing for something different? Is it possible that they just produce a good product and there's no other story behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're willing to do something different, like Isotope, and the story is about difference, and you are kind of like creating and delivering something unique all the time, or design is the incentive, or you don't need the storytelling and initiative if you have an identity, and the identity is to do the thing. But then you have to do the thing so well, or and that's okay as long as you're willing to invest in doing that thing so well, right? I think going back to the coffee analogy, I think that's the best way to go back to it, is that, like, there's a lot of coffee houses that just do blends, and they don't do single origin, they don't do pour overs, they don't do whatever. And it's because when you cater to an audience where that audience is going to deliver that thing, you're going to get them. But you have to temper the expectation, and you need to then really have a pulse, and you have to be willing to move for those people, not expect people to move to you. And I think that when you look at the watch community as well, Vario is a great example, where the story is that, Ivan looks at stuff that's Art Deco, and he's inspired by a particular era, and like the trench watch and stuff like that. We looked at that, and it's like, yeah, that's kind of the only thing he does. Or not, sorry, that's rude. Edelman, that's the only thing he does, but he's known for the trench watch. And so that was something where we could work on a collab, and it was something that truly is unique and it's kind of identifiable to him as his, and then the titanium is ours. There's obviously cool things that he's doing with the Versa, and like, I really love his newest one, the futurist, right?
Mhm.
The futurist.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, it's beautiful, like the faceted crystal and stuff like that. There isn't anything like that, but that those are things where you want to keep being able to restock them to meet demand. But I assume that will be the one in the industry now for a while, that is the faceted crystal and stuff, and that's cool. Like, you can do that, certainly.
That's almost like his UTD. I think I know he's doing really well with the Futurist. I have one actually here, not right next to me, but that's an amazing watch. Very cool release.
It's beautiful, and I think that that's the thing, is that you can create something that people can kind of identify you for something, for a period, and then, but then you also have to think, like, is the audience for that thing something that can run forever? And then you have to start calculating, or thinking, and I think Ivan's he's a great creative, as well as he's a good historian of the watches that he likes, right? And so I think that he's got ideas, but that's where I think we were mentioning earlier about, like, people who are just looking to build a brand. You have to have an idea of what the next thing is, or you need to know watches and like watches beyond that. If you want to start a watch brand, you don't start a coffee shop because you like Tim Hortons. You just keep going to Tim Hortons. Like,
Now, speaking of sustainability, how do you incorporate it into the life cycle of the product and the marketing narrative? Does it ever conflict with scaling goals?
I think it's actually way easier than people think it is to be sustainable. I think it's just about being thoughtful about your packaging and paying for the offset on carbon, because it's not substantial. When you think about it, it's just a choice. If you add the line down to it, you just pay it, and then you just accept it. I think that one of the things around recognizing that all of the products that we're at right now, based on manufacturing capability, modern technology and stuff, is that most of it isn't actually unsustainable. It's almost a discerning choice to make it not sustainable. And that's, it definitely costs us. The money is the thing, I think, but I think that's an investment in it. The product circularity is also an easy thing for us to accept trade-ins and stuff. That's probably the biggest part of the sustainability aspect, the boxes, the shipping, the whatever, or, paying for Project Forest or things like that. That stuff's actually really easy. Thinking about kind of taking trade-ins and calculating the service and whether or not we're going to break even on that or whatever, like trying to lock in those margins so that it makes sense. That's a bit tough, but the reality is that I want to preserve and retain that customer that thinks trading it in is great. Because I think one of the things that kind of takes the cover right off of it for you guys and for a lot of people is that, like, the reason why we went with a 30% difference, like if you buy a used watch from us, it's 70% retail, and when you trade one in, it's 40%. There's a 30% margin there between that, is because if you buy a mechanical watch from us and then the second that someone opens that up, you got to pay that man. In Singapore, you're going to pay that man and he's a watchmaker. That's the thing. And so take the amount of shipping you got to pay to get it to the courier, to the guy. You pay him for opening it up, whether he's touched it or done anything to it or not. And then you pay for shipping it back. And that's basically that, based on how much money we have in our watches, right? If anybody's listening doesn't know how much that is, it's about like $100 odd dollars or 100 and some dollars US is some kind of variance in there in the wheelhouse. And I think that everybody knows this, is that if you get an SKX or any kind of NH35, people are going to be like, oh, but if I get a watchmaker to service it or anybody to service it, it's going to be $100 or 100 and some dollars if I don't do it myself, or blah, blah, blah. And why wouldn't I just get a new one? It's like, guys, if we treat every watchmaker like that, and we start kind of like, and this is not against anybody who's like a watchmaker from a garage or like you self-trained and whatever, but it's like, we're a company. We are a full-fledged watch company, and we are ethical in the way we employ our employees, our contractors. We're based in Singapore. We have a transparent record of customer service and stuff like that. Like, I can't just open it up and give like your word that you never wore this and sell it to someone else. And I think ethically, people want us to pay people well and stuff like that. And so I think it's also really challenging when the online rhetoric is like, well, why this, why that, or whatever, when actually it's really simple. Just when you put it up there and you work it out, you're like, if we do this, this is the sustainability thing. It's not just sustainability in that it's their 3 Ps of like product and people and planet. I know it's super cheesy, but it is a confluence of these things. Is that, when people say you can't have things that are good, cheap, and fast, you got to pick 2 out of 3. It is actually still that thing. And a lot of people, I think maybe Brent, you heard me on a podcast with Ariel say it, and actually it comes up pretty much on every podcast. People are like, whoa, the prices are so good. How do you do it? And I'm like, this is why I don't have nice things myself. This is why I still have the same watch collection I have. This is why I fly coach. This is why, because I want to stay home with my kid and do this thing and make a legacy. I don't need to eat everyone's lunch, because I think if we keep doing this thing, it will scale. If I just like look at the margin and think, if we can get more people paying this, eventually we'll get there. That's a really patient game. And I think that a lot of people are like, I think a lot of people keep asking me that question because they don't believe it. But it is really, truly that simple. And you could ask any person who has a successful coffee shop. You could ask anybody who has a successful anything. Like you could ask Terry from Revolver, like you guys know from Vancouver, is like, it's about consistency. It's not about ripping people off. It's not about being, hiding where the money is getting spent or whatever. It's actually, if you take away all of the online keyboard gangster activity, and you kind of like take what business owners that you trust and believe in are ethically saying at face value, and you stop trying to read between the lines to find out where the truth isn't, that's actually the whole story. I mean, it's like, Isotope or anybody, like ask these people who are doing it ethically and importing it, and you ask them where things are from and stuff like that. They're all the same margins, man. It's not complicated.
We've been grilling you pretty hard here this morning. You had some great answers, so I'm going to throw you a bit of a softball here. I'm curious, what's your favorite watch-related memory? Like a personal memory. It could be from the early days as a young collector. Maybe it's a show you attended, a moment that you had of Eureka with RZE, or maybe it's a watch you owned that existed long before the brand. What's your favorite memory?
Yeah, so I think I touched on this a little bit earlier about kind of my relationship with watches goes back to since I was a child, and my dad was actually the one who introduced me to watches, and him coming as a refugee from Cambodia after the killing fields. We came to Canada in the mid '80s. I wasn't born yet. My brother was born in a refugee camp, but at that refugee camp, one day my dad was sitting there. He didn't have his watch anymore or anything like that. Obviously, it's been after the war, and the in strolls in the Vietnam War. That Vietnamese soldier who isn't identified as a soldier, but my dad knows like this is a soldier that has come into the camp, and he has some things to sell. And one of those things he has is a Rado watch. It's a Rado Dia-Star. It's a watch head. He holds it up and he says, I'm just passing through. If anybody wants this watch and you get like a couple bags of rice or whatever, you can have this watch. My dad looks up. He's like, you're in a refugee camp. People don't like these people. Dad looks up. He's like, you know what? If that's a real Rado watch, I'll give you the rice. And the guy says, well, what? And my dad says, you let me take that out of your hand and I can throw it to the ground. I can grind it into the dirt and I can kick it down the road and it doesn't scratch. And I'll go home and I'll get that rice, like 2 weeks of rice or something like that, which is crazy at a refugee camp, right? It's like, well, that's worth gold. And my dad looks, he's like, yeah, you know what? So he does it, grinds it into the ground, kicks it down the road, real Rado, trades in the rice. I'm 5 years old. He's holding this watch. And we're just getting ready to go to like pawn shop surfing or whatever. If you're from Canada, 118th Ave, Edmonton, early 90s, it is rough. But the thing is, and my dad says to me, you know what happened in that refugee camp is now this is my one watch that I was able to come to Canada with, Swiss watch, looks like this forever, but he only owns one watch, doesn't even wear that watch, can't even scratch it, but that he doesn't wear that watch. But he has that to show me because we're going out and he says, we're going to go to the pawn shops. And because I know something that these people don't, that they don't value and they needed something, they've given up something precious that someone else can take care of or someone else can love or someone else can have. And we're going to go capitalize on that and go out and, we buy watches. And this is the rest of our lives is buying watches. And he would buy a watch, sell it for $20 or extra or whatever. And the one that I remember the most was like one of those following trips very close to that date was a Movado Museum watch in a box. And it's still to this day one of my favorites. And it's under the couch. And he says, like, I just take it out and I look at it, beautiful MoMA award-winning watch. And I just say like, oh man, Dad, like I just love this watch. And he's like, yeah, you can love it. You can appreciate it, but you don't need to own it. You can love it for right now and you'll see it. And someday, like if you want that Movado, it's an iconic watch, iconic museum watch. They're not going away. One of words, they make them like go to the store, still see it. And so, he's like, we're going to sell that. And then we're going to be able to eat. We're going to have nice things or whatever. And someone else who can, appreciate and afford that, they're going to get that watch. They can wear it. They can do whatever. But the guy who didn't value it, they don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And so that taught me a lesson in terms of like, where I went as a watch collector, as well as like what that meant, and kind of like to this day, I don't own a Movado museum watch as beautiful as it is because I know it's just like whatever, man. I can see that just like I can see a Speedy, right? And I do have my dad's Dia-Star, and I think that changed my life in that context. And it's funny is later down the road, obviously, like my dad doesn't wear RZE watches or anything. It's like he's not into it, thinks it's whatever, but he loves Seiko because that's for him. Seiko is the one because it's practical, not extra money or whatever. And you guys will get a kick out of all this to wrap that story is like There's only ones I've given him like I have like the, you know, the baby grand or the fake, you know, the all of the slipping my mind right now, but the like the Alpinist, and then all the ones around that period of Grand Seiko looking Seikos,
Corsage, maybe.
giving him some of those and stuff. He's like, I don't want any of that. I don't understand why these are expensive. Don't get it. And so like he's like, I told him about the Astron, like GPS, you know, like you just never have to set it or whatever. Awesome watch, blah blah blah. He's like, I want that. I was like, sure, Dad, get that. You guys know an Astron is not a cheap watch. He's like, sick, great value. Yeah, this is why all other watches suck. I was like,
That's funny.
so that's one watch, and it's like you'll probably never get or know how much it's actually, and that like it's a far cry from Seiko 5 or something, which he would be like, Seiko good is Seiko 5 is like that's his thing. He's like, you know, the 5 things they believe in. I was like, yeah, Dad, it's the same. But you know, that I mean, it is really that simple though. He likes what he likes, and he told me too. Like, and then he's still a one watch guy. He doesn't care about my Rolex, doesn't care about any of that, you know. And thinking about, like you said, Brent, asking about kind of like what shaped me and how we build our brand. Like I look to my dad. I look to the kids. I look to servicemen and healthcare professionals and what they'll use in their jobs that they can afford, that their kids are looking at thinking like, oh, someday that's going to be mine. And it's a sad story in reality, but it's like, it's not going to be Rolex, guys. It's not going to be Tudor. It's not going to be whatever. And it's like, it's still going to be a lot of Seiko. It's a lot of Casio. It's a lot of G-Shock, but it's like, it is so much Apple Watch. It's so much Garmin. And Jack Mason would be the best example of this. And Peter and I have talked about this, is like, people who kind of get their wedding photos or their LinkedIn photos and stuff when you're kind of like coming of age or you're going into a professional field and stuff, you go to a photographer, a lot of the times they'll be like, you should take off that watch, because a lot of the people who are coming in with that, it's an Apple Watch or something, and it actually dates the photo, because you know that none of those watches are actually going to last. A good photographer will tell you to take it off, and they want you to get a real watch. And that's a thing that people will forget if they don't really sit down and think about it. And I think about that often, that I hope that my watch is one of those ones that will endure, and that people will pick those things to beat them and not care about them. Because if we kind of get too precious about it, and they're all meant to be collectibles or whatever, then it's like, then there's no real stories.
Mm.
You know, like the whole assembled for adventure thing is, I said it in our year-end wrap, is that so many watches in the world, they're finished in the factory. Everyone talks about finishing, finished in the factory, finished like this, hand finished, beautiful finishing, blah, blah, blah. Our watches aren't finished in the factory. They're just getting started. Like every story you have, if it gets traded in or whatever, every lifetime, that's the real story. If we just stop at the factory and it's perfect, don't bother. Just put them with the 299 and just like lock them downstairs and figure it out later.
One thing I was talking to Mark about this actually before you two guys jumped on, but when I first started YouTube, I was plugging away in this basement for months and months and months, and by myself. I didn't know anybody. Like I didn't know anybody in the community. I didn't know Red Bar was a thing. None of that stuff, you know. And the very first person that noticed my channel and reached out to me was Travis, actually, back in the Boulder days. And I can remember he was very concerned about feedback on the Boulder releases, and then the RZE and then the RZE. He's always looking for feedback and communicating with people in the comments and that sort of thing. How important is that now, like community feedback and shaping new releases?
I think that in the beginning, I think it's really important. I think in the end, it's not important at all. I think like I credit Travis a lot to that, and And he was really good at being hands-on. And when you guys might have met me on Instagram initially and stuff like that, I was really hands-on too. But I think as we try to scale and grow the brand, you have to be confident in yourself and what you want the design language and brand to represent and identify with, rather than kind of letting a few people tell you, because then it kind of skews it. And I think even like when we have like, I value our Facebook group a lot, and I'm glad there's a community there and stuff like that as well. But we're also careful, like we appreciate feedback there, especially because we have enthusiasts. But when you kind of like start looking at a non-discerning audience, like just out in the wild, like obviously you guys and reviewers and stuff are important. But when you kind of like collect too much feedback, it becomes noise. And then you start second guessing yourself. And then you end up with things that sing to enthusiasts, but might not have any mainstream appeal. And I think that that's where we get caught up in the watch community with watch brands and stuff like that a lot, is that all I can do is like look at stone dials. And stone dials is the best example of the right now flavor of the month of last year that's going to continue to roll into this year. I mean, I don't think it's any secret is that at one point, India and China, like India's made all these dials and they're all these different stones. And now China's got all these dials or all these different stones that are all from these places, and they're going to get served up to everybody as dial options. And so now you don't need to hear it from me. You can go to Fossil and you can see that all the Fossil watches, there's ones in there that have quartz that have real stone dials too. Like, we could chase that. I could put stone in anything. And someone might tell me, especially if we start looking at feedback of like, why wouldn't we for a special edition? I'm not saying we won't ever, but if we do it right now, wouldn't it just be doing it because everyone else is doing it right now? And does that make it right? And like, does it mean that I'm leaving 100 or 200 or 300 units that I could probably sell to enthusiasts that are wanting that thing in this brand, just like they have it in other brands? Am I leaving that on the table? I don't know, probably. Is like any micro brand leaving it on the table when they don't make the thing that everyone is making and their customer is asking for it? Yes. But does it hurt me to let them get it from somebody else that I know that has a booth at a table that also has a family to feed? It doesn't hurt me. And I think that that's where people have to start getting there, is that your brand doesn't need to have it all. You don't walk into, McDonald's so you can get a teen burger. Just let A&W have that one. Your teen burger's going to be mediocre anyways. Just get that one over there. I think people just got to get comfortable with it, like, I know I try to pull all these analogies from other places and stuff, but it's part of it's the teacher in me. But it's like, life is that simple. Like we kind of like want to do a microcosm or a microscope over the thing. But if we look at a lifestyle thing and you look at all the other facets, it's so much more rewarding, as well as so much more like holistic to think of us not as just like these creatures of like, I mean, I don't know if people don't say this anymore, like watch idiot savants or whatever, right? Like it's these things that were like, or like, I don't like this. And I mean, like Brent knows this is a stupid thing that is happening in education now, is like, well, this is something a little bit autistic about or something. Is like, guys, like, it's not that. It's just people can like whatever they want and they can like that thing, and we don't need to, it's just not that deep. Like, and that's really that's the thing.
It's possible that somebody out there in the audience today is discovering RZE for the first time. So if they pick up an RZE watch, what do you want them to know immediately or understand immediately about your brand and what you're trying to build?
Trying to make something that you can do anything and go anywhere with, beat it to death, and we're going to stand by that product. It's going to be titanium, and it's going to be, as good for you as it's going to be for the next guy. If it's not for you, it's going to be good enough for the next guy. I think that's the thing that we really want to tell people, is that at the end of the day, they're just products. You don't have to love them. If you love them, we want you to really love them and enjoy them. And if not, I think it's okay for you to have someone else have it, and we encourage it. Like, I think that it's something where I hope that attitude towards our brand and that conviction actually encourages people to tell people about that story of what we represent, because it doesn't, if it doesn't mean something to them, hopefully it means something to someone else, and they can talk about it at a dinner table or whatever. Maybe the stars things resonates with them, or the Project Forest thing resonates with them. Is that more than the product you have in the hand? It's what we represent, in that it is a lifestyle, and it suits a good amount of people, and hopefully someone in their life that matches with. You know?
That's a good answer. So we spoke about the UDT 8000 earlier and what a departure it was from other microbrand offerings. Are there any other categories or complications you'd love to explore that might surprise people?
I think for a long time, the super compressor is what actually made me the most enamored to bring me to RZE. We did a true titanium super compressor, and that was the thing that actually Travis compelled me to say, like, we aren't a Pinocchio. We can push the limits. We can do a thing. JLC just expired this, and we can do the thing. We wanted to go back and do an alarm, obviously like a Bellmatic or something like that, but thinking about the cost and the audience, marketable audience size and stuff, that would be like a watch for me. It's like me wanting to make something that nobody but JLC is making. So it's like, we can hold.
That'd be cool.
Like a chronograph, we'd had the Valor chronograph previously, but we were going to make another chronograph, but we kind of thought about it, and we pivoted to make the brand Vostra, which is more of a creative enterprise. And then for the reason of just that a chronograph in our wheelhouse is kind of like, if we were to go mechanical or mecha quartz, mechanical would be too expensive, and mecha quartz, we could just feed it to Vostra as a stainless steel offering, and not charge people the surcharge, and people can still experience it and not need to pay the premium for something that isn't necessary. People aren't really necessarily looking for that. And I think down the road, we're going to try to explore kind of halo pieces, which are going to be more for enthusiasts, because I think it's important for us to explore that. And from a maturity of brand standpoint, it's a risk as much as the UTD would be to assume that people will pay a lot of money. I think a lot of people often encourage us and tell us there's certainly people will pay and stuff like that. But Travis and I are conservative in that we have to be careful with what we invest in and think about for the future. Obviously, solar is on our list for the UTD upgrades and stuff like that. We've been exploring the things that everyone's asking for, and then I want to remind the audience, and I want to shout them out for being patient and supporting the brand, and you guys supporting the brand and stuff like that. But a lot of people clamor and say, like, I want it to be solar, I want it to be this, I want it to be that. And I just want to remind people, like, if you look at the Casio, the GA 2100, it took a long time for them to go solar. And it was like, that was the best seller for years. It boomed and it crushed. But to jacket it in metal, half jacket it in metal, put in Bluetooth and stuff, we're a small brand, and people have to be patient and support it, because it's like we have decisions to make, and I think it's like we want to be boutique size for as long as we can, but at the same time, like, scaling is the challenge. And to give you guys for everyone who's made it this long or whatever, is like looking at Brent's piece or whatever, is the next wave that we have this year is also going to bring full Cerakoted pieces, which is going to be like obviously more premium and stuff, but it also kind of like gives it that unimatic look and stuff, and elevates it without kind of outpricing it too much. Obviously, it's a bit more money, but at the same time, it's going to give the enthusiast kind of something else to look forward to. The new Cerakote pieces are just like absolutely beautiful. It's just the finishing of the coating and stuff like that. It gives you that kind of plasticky, G-Shocky excitement, but in titanium and stuff. And I think that's where probably, Brent, like when you felt it, you're like, okay, this is like, if it changes what people perceive it as. And I think we wanted to kind of give it a go and let people kind of experience the blackout coating of the case and stuff. And so seeing different finishes come to the UTD is going to expand that, so that it really does kind of close the loop on anyone kind of knocking on the door of that, being like, oh, I could probably do that.
Cool. So 2 really quick rapid fire questions before we end this here. What's the RZE or non-RZE watch that you reach for the most often, and why?
It's got to be the Cartier Santos. Like I think it's thin, it's easy, Christmas season or whatever. When it's not that, it's the Breitling Aerospace. If it's not dressy season, those are things that I think have always been really steady for me in the lifetime of my watch journey, actually, in terms of instant quartz. I think it's so easy to just like, it's got to be quartz if you're like, what am I going to wear all the time?
And outside of watches and marketing, what's something that constantly sparks creativity in you?
I think art is the thing that really gets me and inspires me, is like art and photography. Brent and I talk about this too, is like things like that. Like I seeing people like Kirk and even like Bob, you as a creator and stuff like that. Anybody who's going out there and putting themselves out there to create something that is of themselves but resonates with other people. There is certainly a big gap between a working artist versus an artist who creates every day. But in both circumstances, they got to dig deep every day to create something incredible. And I think just the output of the creators and the influencers and stuff like that that are putting out all the quality creative and stuff that they put out, it's inspiring. It really is inspiring to see creators kind of like make something fun and make something that makes you feel and makes people connect with you. And you know, Dan is such a great example of another Canadian creator, and like him doing the 12 days of dance and stuff where you're kind of like making all these great videos and stuff like that. It's crazy how much work that Dan's doing uh, community in that context. And yeah, that's probably the most inspiring. It's what's inspiring as well as crippling for me, because as a creator myself, or trying to be a creator myself as an individual or whatever, when you're seeing how good people's stuff is, it's so hard to get out there and do the thing yourself. It cripples you with confidence. But I think the thing it's also taught me is that like you just have to go out and do the thing. I know that other watch brands are also probably, when you're trying to start a watch brand, you feel like that too. You're looking at like, oh, these guys do so good and stuff like that. But the point isn't to do what other people are doing; it's to execute it. And I think that when people start to look at what you're doing and how you're doing it consistently, it's not about the product always. It's about how you do it. And that's what's creative, is like, look at the artist. It's not about Jackson Pollock and the fact that he's splashing it. It's how he
Mhm.
splashes it and the emotion and the feeling and stuff. And so, yeah, artists, that's got to be it. Creatives, content creators. Yeah. We're lucky to share the space.
I think that's a perfect note to end on here today. Huiy, I can't thank you enough for joining us here this morning and for spending these last 2 hours with us. And also thank you for your candor. It's been fantastic. And also for being an active member of the watch scene. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to check out RZE at rzewatches.com. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening right now. It really helps us bringing you more conversations just like this one. Until next time, T2C out.